growing up, my brother and I befriended the neighboring kid. It just so happened that our neighboring kid was 6'3", 60 years old, and autistic. His name is James. He can't possibly weigh more than 130 pounds, and he has hair quite similar to Albert Einstein's. He's the guy who's used the same piece of tape to hold his Coke bottle glasses together all these years. He lives alone in his childhood home, and we shared a backyard fence. James grew up with his parents and an older brother. Tragically, his brother was hit by a car in his 20s and passed away. His mother developed a fatal brain tumor, and his father, who I met when I was an infant, became senile in his later years and passed away as well. James is quite a solitary person, but stays busy. He faithfully attends church every single weekend and worked at Coco's restaurant for 35 years, only missing 2 days. I don't specifically recall meeting him. He's just been in my life as long as I can remember. I really got to know him when I reached 3 years of age. As a toddler, I didn't think James was different than us. In fact, when he showed me around his garden, I became enveloped in his world. We were surrounded by his seasonal crops, a lemon tree, and a dozen different roses. Lying at the center of his garden is the single most important thing in his life, Gigi, a small rose with a gentle purple tint. Now, none of us are entirely sure how Gigi entered James's life, but as we've learned over the years, Gigi is a source of advice, humor, and a friend with whom he converses. There are plenty of roses in his yard, but Gigi is sacred to him. Just like kids find life in dolls or stuffed animals, James found life in Gigi. And when I was 3 years old, he let me in on this secret world. Over the years, James has given us his homegrown squash, pumpkins, and various roses and catnip. But it wasn't until years later that he gave us Gigi in a profound sign of true friendship. Sadly, his life took a turn for the worse shortly thereafter. When I was 8 years old, a man named Redmond Enright moved into James's house as a caretaker and a trustee. If you Google Redmond Enright, you will see this. Man arrested after operating on birds sedated with vodka. Red was a psychopathic bird hoarder, to say the least. He looked quite similar to the dwarfs from Lord of the Rings. A short, plump, rugged man with a big red beard covered in bird feathers. He was arrested for keeping over 300 birds, mostly pigeons, in his house, and over 150 dead ones. When the police found him, he was performing mouth-to-beak resuscitation on a pigeon. Brilliant. After his arrest and closure of his house, Red moved in with James. Most of the neighborhood thought it was good for James to have a caretaker. They understood Red was a little odd, but hey, so is James. This was not the case at all. Red oppressed and threatened James, and we rarely saw him anymore. The few times we did see him, he looked even skinnier. Through the eyes of an 8-year-old, my good friend needed help. My brother Chris and I were probably more intimidated by Red than James was. My parents, being the kind-hearted people they are, spoke with Red and often found the good in him. While my parents were being kind to Red, my brother and I declared war on him to liberate James. You may be wondering, how do an 8-year-old and a 12-year-old declare war? We began by writing a formal letter for which I have Chris to thank. It read as follows. Red, get out of James's house and stop being mean to him. From Anonymous. Besides the horrendous manuscript of a young kid, Chris also misspelled Anonymous and added a cartoon picture of Red at the bottom of the page. We realized our cover was blown when our parents received a photocopy of our letter, accompanied by a typed letter from a lawyer. Our parents made us march to Red's house and apologize. We were henceforth forbidden from disrupting Red. The first rule about boys is that no means yes. We were persistent and our friends still needed help, but we needed to be sneakier. We built a forward operating base. We camouflaged our pool equipment shed and set bamboo fencing around the premise, as this area was closest to James's house. We dug tunnels under our fence so we could have easy access to his yard, mostly for intelligence gathering purposes. One day, while our parents were gone, Chris and I attached a party popper to Red's door and rung the doorbell. That ambushed Red with a loud pop and a fountain of confetti. Our actions were not stemming from a place of malice, but answering to an unheard cry of help from our friend. As kids, Chris and I didn't have any preconceived notions regarding Red. Our feelings evolved from what we could learn firsthand. The adults in the neighborhood never spoke with Red, but assumed he was a good man because of his background as a lawyer and intentions for caring for James. Young children are an epitome of the moral, don't judge a book by its cover. Chris and I knew Red was not a good man, for he yelled at us for accidentally kicking soccer balls over the fence and for climbing trees, and he never allowed us to see James. It wasn't until his death that we found out how atrocious he actually was. In 2010, Redmond Enright died due to a heart attack caused by ingesting daily doses of pigeon supplements. Darwin was hard at work. The very day Redmond Enright died, James was the energetic, happy man he was before. James released hundreds of pigeons, literally, that Red had stored in his home, and thus a burden was lifted. He told us that Red threatened to kill his beloved cats if he spoke of the pigeons. My mother and father dedicated an abundance of time to helping James with his situation. Since Red died, they became James's trustees and helped remodel his house. James lost his job at Coco's when they closed it, and my father went to meet with the manager to gather some form of pension. My dad found out that James never actually worked at Coco's. He showed up faithfully every single day for 35 years, except for 2 days. And in return, the Coco's staff would feed him breakfast, but he didn't earn a single paycheck. One day, while trying to help James clean his house, my father made another shocking discovery. Red had stored a pistol, a live hand grenade, which is bad enough, and a 1990s X-rays machine for his pigeons, which is incredibly illegal and leaks radiation. Maybe Red was preparing to go to war with us. My dad later learned that Red bought $300,000 worth of gold with James's money, and he hid it in the house. Soon after Red died, some of his friends came and stole the gold. The psychological trauma James endured still makes him hesitant to speak of Red, the pigeons, or the gold. Somehow, James didn't care about the gold though. This was one of the most powerful lessons I've ever learned. Money, objects, a house, those aren't happiness. Happiness comes from within and from freedom. Once Red was gone, James was truly happy. He was free to garden whenever he liked and could have as many cats as his heart could desire, and he could walk until his legs gave out. He rarely showered though, ate 1 meal per day, but he was a very happy man. How could this be? I was slightly older when Red died, and I compared our situations. I had a house, clean clothes, and a shower. I ate 3, sometimes 4 meals a day, but at times I was not very happy. Whenever I visited James, it was like hitting a reset button. I saw how James appreciated the little things in life, his roses, cats, and giving to others. It really put my problems into perspective and made me grateful for everything I have. Besides my family and Gigi, James is quite alone in this world. Without my parents, James would still be living in awful conditions and with poor health. By reaching out, we greatly improved his life and ours too. I learned hands-on why we shouldn't judge a book by its cover and that possessions don't ensure happiness. As shown by his giving us Gigi, our friendship is mutual. Unfortunately, only a few of the other neighbors were brave enough to help James, most of whom knew him since he was a child, and none of the adults were enthusiastically befriending him. Why does our instinct to help others fade as we age? A study by UC Berkeley suggested it comes from a number of things, including that we could become more self-centered as we grow up. At some point in our life, each of us will encounter our own version of James. Don't shy away from the challenge. I encourage everyone to reach out to that person who is slightly odd or somebody in need, as you can help and you will learn a lot regardless of the outcome. If we put aside our biases, social norms, and selfishness, not only will you help others, but you will also live a happier life. Thank you.